giving me a little bit, or give me a little bit about your background. What's led you, what path did you take to lead you to where you are today?
Well, I was a television producer for about 15 years, and a lot of that work started leaving California, and sort of the budgets got smaller, and a lot of the projects dried up, and um, I kind of at the time was sort of getting into YouTube, and a lot of the shows I was working on had a very much a viral video component. So I had a lot of data to look at, and I realized that there was kind of a hole on the web at the time, is that no one was really doing sort of a video blog about cannabis. There were only a couple people, most of them were up in Canada, and not many coming out of California. And I was like, here's something that I have access to that a lot of people in the world don't have access to, which is just this crazy selection of insane California kind bud, and the concentrates that go along with it. And I made a little YouTube thing called the Weed Report, and it caught on, particularly in Canada and England, Australia, some other parts of the English-speaking world, and it caught on in California as well. So I did some episodes of the Weed Report, and some people contacted me, and they wanted me to start profiling their collectives or their strains that they were growing. So I
Mhm.
started sort of billing collectives and billing companies to make small videos and put them online, and they had a pretty good response, and I was a TV producer, like I said, so I was not only doing the profiles of the flowers, but I was also adding in comedy videos and doing a segment called The World of Weed. And people would mail me pictures of their buds or their concentrates that they had grown or made from around the world, and I'd feature those. And that sort of added to the popularity, and eventually got a job offer to work at a dispensary. And it was like starting over in a new career, and it was definitely a big step down for me, sort of ego-wise and financially. But within 6 months, I was managing 2 dispensaries,
Mm.
and with that came a lot of access. And even so, as my videos were able to get even more sort of intense and developed, and more people started reaching out, and it really became successful for the dispensaries I was managing, because people were reaching out and they're like, hey, I can bring you this, you can carry this in your shop. So we started getting a lot of diversity, a lot of products from different parts of the state that different collectives didn't have, and a lot of like new products. We started getting people the first vape carts, the first cannabis vape carts people started making in California. We started carrying those, and people started branding more and more. And we started realizing, hey, what we started seeing what was working with the consumers, because we were, in retail, so we were on the ground floor, and we were interacting directly with the consumers, seeing what they responded to. So we started developing our own brands based on what we were seeing other brands do, like what was working and what wasn't. And we were able to experiment because we had retail outlets where we could come up with an idea, come up with a logo, a design, put a sticker on it, package it, and see how people responded. And we could see it directly. So it wasn't much of a risk. We could just make a few hundred units of something, put them in a couple dispensaries, see if people liked them. And we learned a lot from that. And we were able to do that. And basically what we kind of our thing that we started doing is I realized that if you carry a lot of brands, there's a lot of reasons for people to come to your store. A lot of retailers at that time really weren't interested in carrying a lot of inventory because they didn't want to invest the expense, and they didn't want to take the risk that a product wouldn't sell. Whereas I kind of went in the other direction with the dispensaries I was managing. I was like, let's carry as many products as possible. And one in particularly, the weed, and on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City, California, got very popular and became sort of a destination spot for consumers because we carried so much. And they would drive in from the desert, and they'd drive down from even Northern California, and we were getting a wide array of very sophisticated, discerning consumers that were coming in. And it became sort of a spot for brands where if you had a new product or new brand, that's kind of where you came to test it. And we would basically tell people, it's like, look, if you're willing to consign your product with us and then come down and support it, give out some samples, do stuff like that, do in-stores, we'll give you shelf space right next to your main competitors. And it was kind of like we called it a drag racing strip for brands, because people would had a new brand or new concept, and they would bring it to us, and we'd be like, all right, let's see how it does. And we were open to it because we wanted everyone to succeed, because as a retailer, it doesn't matter particularly whose brand you're selling, as long as you're selling stuff. So
Mhm.
for us, it's like, hey, we'll give you the opportunity. We want you to succeed. And we were really sort of supportive of the new brands coming into the space. And people could take their little hippie brand from like Humboldt and race it against one of these bigger brands from like Colorado or something that had, come into the California space. So it was really fun and really interesting. It kind of gave me a way to meet a lot of people. From that, we realized, hey, let's develop some of our own brands. And one of the brands we developed was one that became very successful. I created a brand called Nameless Genetics. One day, the owner of the store came in and was like, I need a genetics company. And 20 minutes later, I called him back and I was like, it's Nameless Genetics. No name, just flame. And the concept there was, it was based around, a lot of people were starting to use celebrities, or, in those days we didn't have the term influencer, but, well-known people to attach their brand. But the concept for Nameless was, there's no face that goes with this. There's no name. This is product so good that it is beyond description in the English language. This is flower so strong that it cannot be named. It is, you know what I mean? It is beyond that. It cannot be defined because it is so dank. And we had truly amazing products. Like, they really were quite good. And because we had a forum where we could put it right next to the other products, we put it next to Moxie and Prime and Gold Coast and some really amazing, really high performing brands. And we found that it was hanging with those brands, and in many cases exceeding their popularity and sales. So the dispensary got really popular, and the owner sold it for quite a large profit. It was a lot of people thought it was highly overvalued, but because the brand cachet we had developed, and because of the following, and sort of the idea of a destination dispensary, that you're going to go hours out of your way to go see this place. It's like a little wonderland of cannabis products. And that we sold that dispensary, and then we went into Nameless Genetics full time. And in about a year, we had 30x sales growth,
Wow.
because it was a really amazing product, and people were, not only did they like the product, but they were enchanted by the concept, and did Nameless for a long time. It became the most award-winning brand in Southern California, which is the largest cannabis market in the world and the most competitive cannabis market. So we're really proud of that. It's just a big following. And so from that, Nameless went on, grew, and kind of in my career got to the point was, well, that is amazing. Can I do it again? Because you do it once and you wonder, was I lucky? Was just the timing right? Can I repeat that? And that's sort of at the point in my career I'm at now, is developing new products, developing new brands, and then helping take the knowledge that I gained through that experience and trying to help other people launch their brands as a consultant, or as an advisor. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is developing my own products and then also helping people develop their brands. I do consulting in retail, in product development, in branding, and pretty much any part of the supply chain where somebody's operating. I have some sort of experience or insight, or know someone who is an expert in that field. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is doing the consulting thing, starting as a small business, and hoping I can catch lightning in a bottle again.
That sounds great. But when you say that you're looking to develop your own brand, how do you do that when you're not producing that particular brand?
Well, now, especially in California, it's really about supply chain management. I mean, a brand. A lot of people sort of, pardon me, there's a little background noise. Many of the clients I work with are in industrial zones, so they're always near an airport or a railway,
Mhm.
because that's where cities license them. Essentially, a cannabis brand is, people put a lot of importance on branding, and it is important, but really all it is a logo on a box with a story behind it and a product inside. So the branding part's really easy. You kind of, after a few years, you come up with sort of concepts that you feel like could catch on. And once you get sort of practiced at it, you realize, like, hey, if I come up with a concept and it doesn't catch on, that's not a big deal. We'll just come up with a new concept. And now basically you come up with a concept, And because of the ways the laws are written in California, it's about finding a supplier who provides a product that's equivalent to that brand identity. Is it an economy brand? Is it a premium economy brand? It's an ultra premium brand. And you find the equivalent product in the supply chain, and you basically make them a partner in your company. You know, you say, we'll give you X amount of equity if you'll be the supplier for this brand, or if you'll be the distributor. And you try and obviously retain as much as you can, and do it in as small of a batch as possible, so you can do your test marketing without committing to large scale inventory. Because if it doesn't catch on, if it's not priced right, or if it's just the brand didn't hook with consumers like you hoped, or whatever, you're not overly committed at that point. You could sort of move on to the next idea, or rework the idea, or rework the promotion. So it's really kind of California right now. It's very tough to start a brand if you're not a grower, or if you're not an extractor. But if you have the right contacts and sort of the right concept, you can bring sort of people and make them a part of your team. And by doing that, you sort of get them invested in your success. So it's really just about collaboration and relationships. You know, if you're trying to launch like a brand, and it kind of just goes to the sort of the white labeling and co-packing sort of concept that comes from other industries, you know, that like a lot of alcohol companies do that. You know, they come up with a cool brand, and the stuff is brewed or distilled by somebody else, but then they bring it to market as that brand and see how it goes. And eventually, if things go well, you develop your own production, or, you know, you expand that relationship.
Right. Okay. So I definitely hear that and understand for our listeners to this, and as well as for our readers to understand how branding would work in the industry, and in particular for California. Speaking of the California market, as you mentioned, you guys are the largest market in the world, and it is huge based on all kinds of metrics. But as someone involved in the industry there, what do you see as the biggest benefit of the cannabis industry in your area in California?
I think the biggest benefit is population mass. With a large population center, you're able to access a wide variety of potential consumers. So if your product appeals to a certain consumer segment or a certain demographic, you're going to have a lot of people from each demographic sort of available to you. Places like, you know, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, millions of people. So your potential for adoption is much higher, and the potential that your brand will appeal to consumers is higher. The other thing is California people are, in general, very sophisticated cannabis consumers. They've been consuming cannabis for a long time. They are very familiar with high quality products. So the kind of idea is sort of like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, sort of thing. And in
Mhm.
addition to that, if you can survive with the high taxes and the difficult regulations, then if you could do it here, then you'll probably be able to make it work in other states as well. Whereas if you launch in another state, you have less population mass to work with. I know a lot of people are also eyeing New York for that sort of possibility, being able to access that level of population and that level of discretionary income.
Okay. And what about a state like Michigan that was just legalized? If someone is looking to launch, with your experience out of California, what kind of advice would you give to a newcomer to the industry in the Michigan market?
Well, I could say a lot of people in the California market, and a lot of financiers that are coming, are very excited about Michigan, because it's kind of an anomaly
Hmm.
in the Midwest. Michigan, you know, with that whole Hash Wednesday culture that they had for so many years, Michigan has always been sort of a hot spot in the Midwest for cannabis. So those consumers are also fairly sophisticated for the
Hmm.
compared to the age of their market, you know, which is technically brand new. Um, for Michigan people, I think it all comes down once again just to the fundamentals. It's like, what's your brand concept, and what do people from Michigan respond to? You know what I mean? What are their values? What are their core values? And that sort of value-based branding can sort of be transferred to any market. Some areas, price is the biggest concern. Some areas, quality is the biggest concern. And then, some areas, it's really about identifying with the local culture and sort of being a part of that. They want to support the concept of local. They want to support the concept of like a family farm. It kind of just, with every market you go into, you kind of have to reevaluate your marketing strategy and reevaluate your product fundamentals. How does it look? What's the brand voice? And who, identifying who are the consumers, how much discretionary income do they have that they can in their weed budget, how much can they devote to cannabis? But I think that Michigan is very exciting because you have a lot of sophisticated consumers, and it's also just kind of that crux. It's always been sort of influenced by Canadian cannabis culture, which is very powerful and very advanced, and having access to Canadian weed, which for many years was superior to what most domestic weed producers were making.
Right. And, a lot of Canadian producers would like to have you know that they think that they are still superior.
Sure.
Um,
What I say, everybody's baby is the prettiest.
exactly.
No one's going to tell you that they have an ugly baby.
That is great. Um, yeah. And so with branding, let's hone in on that a little bit. So if I am looking to create a brand, um, give me an idea of what kind of dollar range am I looking to spend to create a brand? Because we are going to have a lot of listeners and a lot of readers that they're thinking about formulating their own brand. And, just giving them some key information points of, you know, doing a brand is great. You need to, have your supply chain in good order and have people around you. You can't do it alone. You need a lot of people working with you. But then also on the financial side, what kind of costs are we looking at?
It depends on the region, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars if you want to do it compliantly.
Hmm.
And it is a real shame because it's cost prohibitive for most people without investment support. And the problem with, if you have a cool brand concept and you want to keep it a certain way, often you have to make compromises to get your investors on board, and sometimes those compromises undermine the brand integrity. And that is the hardest part of it. Is often when you take investment or outside money, you have to conform to their expectations, and what they think the consumers like, and how they want to approach it, and how they want to handle the supply chain, and how they want to, and it's really difficult, and it is a crying shame. It really is, because it's like the it is so cost prohibitive to get in, and you have to risk so much that if it doesn't work out and you're self-funded, you could be ruined. That could be your retirement money gone. That could be you might have to sell your house. You might have to finance something like this. You might have to part with some really dear possessions. And I would warn people, don't take money from your relatives.
Mm.
Boy, if that doesn't go right, not only are you broke, but now your family doesn't love you anymore. And I've
Yeah.
seen it happen a lot. And that, I mean, and that's not only in the cannabis industry. That, I think, goes to very much to like the restaurant industry and the food and beverage industry. When somebody wants to launch a brand, and if they try and self-fund or take money from their family, that stress is often not worth it. If it goes well, sometimes even that stress isn't worth it. Even sometimes those relationships are ruined. So as far as the financial burden is vast, and I don't think these days it matters where you are, because if you're working in the legal cannabis field, a lot of municipalities have incredibly overtaxed the products. So your end product is going to be higher than your actual SKU design. You're designing this unit, and you say this will go to the this will go to the public at this level, and I feel like with this quality and this brand, they will pay this much for it. But you have to calculate in, like in Los Angeles, 34.5%. And that's just on, and that's the excise tax, and then like the local use tax, and then the additional normal California sales tax that you have to pay on any item you buy in California. And that's not including the canopy taxes you paid for growing it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And some regions, like some local municipalities, will even have taxes on the distribution center and their profits. So there, I believe in like Sonoma County, California, if you grow cannabis and sell it in that county, it gets taxed 9 times before it gets to the consumer. So you're fighting that, and then also your licensing costs. If you're the license holder, you have to pay sometimes these amazingly high application fees, and that's just an application fee. You might not get approved. So I
Mhm.
think that's the real problem. Is a lot of municipalities are really, everyone saw this cannabis, legalizing cannabis, as a solution to every financial problem that anyone's ever had. And everyone got excited, and sort of the vibe was, well, it's weed. People will buy it no matter how much it costs. And we're finding, particularly in California, that isn't true. Cannabis has always been a black market commodity, and everyone who's smoked it up until this point still knows how to get it on the black market. And often the price is much lower. It's sometimes more convenient to get in places that may not have dispensaries. So when anyone who's thinking about creating a legal product and entering the cannabis market, pretty much in anywhere in the world, I would say, you got to consider all those things. And your return on investment is going to take a while. And that's a problem with dealing with investors. We want to make money by next year, and that's often not the case. The margins are lean. There's so many things that can go wrong when you're launching any business. You've got universal entropy, acts of God, and human error, and those things are going to happen to you along the way. You are going to have hurdles. So if you don't have like enough money and resources to withstand, problems that could come along the way, we see a lot of people, they're already operating on a razor thin margin, and then something happens. There's a snowstorm and the ceiling falls in at their grow, or one of their distributors gets busted, or their products don't test clean and they have to do a recall. And a lot of people just aren't prepared for that massive expense. So if you are going to get into it, and if you're going to be self-funded, you have to save at least half of your original investment for force majeure. For things go wrong, and you got to be
Mhm.
prepared to withstand those things.